up, we have Samantak. Samantak Bhadra's poems and reviews have been published in 8 countries across 25 plus magazines and anthologies like Rain Taxi, The Missing Slate, Solstice Initiative, Rikuro Poem, Not Magazine, and Taj Mahal Review, among others. He's a TEDx speaker and the first Millennium Fellow from India, and has been a journalist, a legal tech, and medical entrepreneur, a software engineer, a certified soft skills trainer, a sales and marketing manager, and a CSR professional before starting The Sound in mid 2019, which provides branding, marketing, and creative consulting services. He has been conducting poetry readings and workshops in Bangalore, Pune, and Mumbai since 2014. Let's welcome Samantak.
Hi, Vishal. Thank
Hi.
you so much for inviting me over. Abhirami again, she just calls me up a day before and tells me that, hey, we are. I have heard about you guys as an organization, and I know Abhirami as a friend whom I keep on meeting at Artagalata, that Cozy's bookstore. That's a common friend to all of us, and it so happened that thankfully she thought of me. I was really glad. Really thankful to you guys for having done this, for actually doing this on a regular basis. And it's a conversation that's of course important, but it's a conversation that does not happen in such a concerted manner, especially in uncertain times like these, where suddenly COVID is the topic to talk about. It's the fad, it's the hashtag to be, right? But yeah, I mean, essentially coming to the point, I wanted to kind of address, I mean, or rather talk about feminism from a very personal angle, right? I mean, of course, there, all of us know the pros, all of us know the steps that have been taken in today's times, all of us also know the cons that are currently prevailing and what needs to be done. But without rather going into spaces of rather, rather than talking about it uh, from a rather third person space, I thought maybe why don't I talk about, and rather also while talking about it, give examples of some poetry that that's kind of been the cornerstone for my understanding of feminism. Because after all, at the end of the day, men talking about feminism is tends to become mansplaining to a certain angle. So I after a point of time, I just revert to the subject matter experts, essentially poets, feminist poets, women poets, essentially, who've talked about, who've not just written poetry for the sake of writing poetry, but people who've actually lived or felt. It's a felt lived experience, and from that comes the poem. I mean, poetry was, of course, just an art form. It's my favorite art form, but at the same time, it's an art form, and I believe that somehow it's been a lot easier. It's poetry for me rather has been the sugar coated element that has allowed me to kind of slip in points, uncomfortable pieces of information for men in a conversation which only involves men, and casual sexism which is absolutely rife, right? And we don't see casual sexism going away tomorrow, no matter how many good steps we take. And more often than not, I have seen that if I make an obvious counterjection, a sort of a counterpoint, which is, hey, I don't think what you said is correct. If, for example, I use the example or reference of art, like, so and so said this, or, according to the scriptures, this happened, what happens? The authority is not me anymore. The authority is somewhere out there. Suddenly it becomes a little tough for people to actually come back and say something. So it's a little sly ploy I use just to be able to kind of send across a message. Because when you say I think, it becomes a space for becoming defensive. Everybody sits back in their silos. So I mean, yeah, I mean from that perspective, I find this conversation, I found your perspective when you started off the webinar today. I found the perspectives of the various men. I found the perspectives that Abhirami talked about through Bell Hooks writing, very, very interesting, because all of us, as you can see, are coming from very, very different spaces, without the bias of gender. We're just coming from very different lived experiences ourselves, and from that perspective, there was I'll probably talk about this and give and intersperse these with examples of some poems, and poems essentially right from one of my favorite eras, which is the Bhakti era. The Bhakti poets, apart from sounding fancy, they're also this lovely set of women poets who really fought, so to say, for I mean, it's always been about identity, right? It's about reclamation of identity, right? Identity that should not be a fight for, that should ideally, like we say, at a space of equitability, where identity should not be fought for, but the reality is that we have to, unfortunately. And we see it from the 6th century CE, where Bhakti poets like Akka Mahadevi, where we see Mirabai, they talk about, or their crusade is from the space or the word of love, right? I mean, although today it's love is a much cliched topic in poetry or in conversations. Back then, talking about love was in itself an act of rebellion. In many ways, it is still very much an act of rebellion. But uh, I marvel at the ingenuity with which these bhakti poets have kind of used love mixed with the sense of religiosity to kind of bring forth their idea of being a rebel, their idea of saying, no, I will not take it lying down. This is how I feel. This is what I think. And this is how I'm going to be talking about my love. And in fact, for me personally, it's been a great learning experience. And I keep on saying this is a personal set of points because as men, we've grown up. I mean, our education since the time we were kids, in the circles that we have grown up in middle class Indian society, you know, uh, in the in the late 20th century, right? It's always been mostly a very sexist upbringing, right? We come from a place of always assuming, it was always told to us that the mother is supposed to be a little quieter in the household while the father takes decision. Something as simple as that, to the idea of what love is, to the idea of how babies come, all of it, right? Everything has an element of subtle, like repress, a history of repression, a history of sexism, history of racism, a history of the body as a very political space. So, I mean, without further ado, I'll just take two poems as examples of what I was talking about when it comes to the struggles of love, and how love and religiosity was very ingeniously used by the Bhakti poets to really bring forth the rebelliousness in their own selves. So, this is essentially a poem by Akka Mahadevi. Um, yeah, so Akka Mahadevi's this particular poem, which was translated by the very famous poet A.K. Ramanujan, uh, it's both against the roles forced upon her by society, as well as a means to a sort of a liberation, a spiritual liberation, a liberation of the body and the mind. This poem is called Not One, Not Two, Not Three or Four. I've kept some tabs open with all my poems here. So, I mean, not one, not two, not three or four goes like this. Not one, not two, not three or four, but through 84,000 vaginas have I come. I have come through unlikely worlds, guzzled on pleasure and pain. Whatever be all previous lives, show me mercy this one day, O Lord, white as jasmine. So, I mean, just reading it once more, the last part, I have come through unlikely world, guzzled on pleasure and pain. Whatever be all the previous lives, show me mercy this one day, O Lord, white as jasmine. This is her love pain for Lord Shiva. And through this, as we see, she's using stronger, like words with a sense of urgency and energy in it, like guzzled on pleasure and pain, right? Or words like, show me mercy. I'm not just talking about a tame love poem. I'm really talking about a space of energy, a space of reclaiming her identity, and really showcasing her love, calling a spade for Lord Shiva. I don't care what the world thinks. This is what my love is all about, and this is what it is. So these are poems that have really been. The reason I speak of these poems is because they have played a formidable role in my understanding of feminism as a space of feminist discourses. Similarly, a poem by Mirabai, which goes something like this. Uh, and here she is, the operative word in Mirabai's poem is about being unabashed about her love. She loves, and she says, "I don't care, I love." And this is such a strong statement. I mean, this is such a space of inspiration. I mean, regardless of gender, for men, for women, this space of being unabashed, right? And that too in the 6th century. I mean, we can only imagine what kind of a rebellion that would have been. The poem is called "I Am True to My Lord," and this poem goes like this. I am true to my Lord. O my companions, there is nothing to be ashamed of now, since I have been seen dancing openly. In the day I have no hunger, at night I am restless and cannot sleep. Leaving these troubles behind, I go to the other side. A hidden knowledge has taken hold of me. My relations surround me like bees. But Meera is the servant of her beloved Giridhar, and she cares nothing that people mock her. Translated by Effie Key, a wonderful translator. These two poems to me, essentially, are great examples. I mean, imagine, right? I keep on talking about love. I mean, love is such an obvious emotion for men. It's such an easy emotion for men. I mean, I still remember back in my postgraduate days, a bunch of friends used to walk into my hostel, and just we'll sit together, and I'm probably sitting at a corner of the room, and friends used to come together and start openly objectifying and talking about women that they like, right? It's such an easy obvious space to be in. If you're a man, if you're supposed to be cool, if you're supposed to be hanging out with a band of boys, you objectify, you talk about love openly, you talk about sex openly, you talk about all of it just openly, right? I mean, you don't think twice. You've never been taught that you need to think twice. You've always been told that it's okay for you to speak like this by virtue of the birth, right? So I mean, therefore, for me, through a lived experience where I've always come to know that when it comes to love, man has the first voice. A woman's opinion comes right after the man's. It's important, but it's not as important as the man's. If a man says something and a woman says something, and you have to be circumspect about somebody's opinion, it's probably the woman's that you should be circumspect about. Because what does she know? That sort of a space coming from the casual sexist angle. It, even among family members, right? And then of course in your nearest and dearest family of circle of friends, and we even see that translating into the politics of the day as we speak. But that's a debate for another day. I mean, the point is, love, therefore, for me personally speaking, in my personal journey of rather in my personal journey of unlearning, of really breaking my ideas of where a man stands, where a woman stands, what is gender all about. I know in my process of unlearning, love has been a very, very important space, and bhakti poetry from that angle has really held it all together for me. um, I another space is of course coming from the space of being that I'm a Bengali, right? And we all know about the stereotypical Bengali babu, and Bengali babus, in fact, I mean, when I was young, I was told that being a Bengali, being that it's coming from the space, land of intellectuals, coming with such a rich cultural history, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. You know, you have the right to feel egoistic. You have a special place in the hierarchy of egoism. Like, you're allowed to be egoistic because you're a Bengali. That's sort of a space, right? I mean, I'm not just saying Bengalis. I'm sure this is also common across many other geographies, many other cultural contexts. But for me, as lived experience, I can speak as a Bengali. And what I later realized is, this process of unlearning has not only about breaking my own perception, but also about my perceptions of the past. Past that I have not lived through, but a perception of which has been built into me through the narratives of my elder generations, the elder ones, right? I mean, they've taught me how I should look at the past. And me personally, I love to write poetry in the space of post memory, as a sociological concept where you haven't lived that memory, it's not your memory, but you've heard about stories of your grandfathers and your fathers and ancestors and partition and so many things, that you've heard them so many times that they really become your memories, that you develop an image of those memories, but the image is not the same, right? I mean, this image is based on your lived experiences, but at the same time you develop very sexist, very racist underlying subtle tones of sexism and racism in these memories. They come inside your mind very harmlessly. You were told that your grandmother did what she was supposed to do, raise her kids. She had 8 kids, and she was a noble woman. What is the definition of a nobility? That she raised those kids, right? And at the time, I would be like, oh my God, grandmother, you're so amazing. Now, I mean, 20 years later, after having made a statement like that, I'll be like, oh my God, right? I mean, now, after having gone through a process of unlearning, and when I say a process of unlearning, it's still going on, of course. I cannot claim to have reached a particular space. There would have been a delta change or delta improvement, but of course it's a process still for me. But now when I look and think of my grandmother, I can only think of oppression. I can only think of this systemic sense of suppression and oppression that she had to live through. The question of choice was something I never thought as a child. And now I think of, oh my God, I mean, like, I wish I could spend one more day with my grandma talking about oppression, in her own way. She maybe couldn't tell me about it because she was taught never to talk about it, and she just internalized it and maybe passed it on across to the next few generations. And from that space, I come to another very, very fiery, but little known Bengali poet herself. Her name is Moksho Dayani Mukhopadhyay. She was born in 1848, and she wrote this amazing poem called Bangali Babu. you know and the special piece about this poem is there's no mention of women or women oppression or feminism here, but by talking about the Bengali Babu and the very fragility of his ego and the very superficiality that defined him and therefore defined society and therefore the sexism prevalent in society at the time, it was a commentary on the suppression of on the suppression of the female, on the suppression of everything that was not the Bengali Babu. And this poem is far more remarkable when you think who Moksha Dayani was. Moksha Dayani was the sister of W.C. Banerjee, who was the first president of the International Congress back then. So imagine I mean, she had privilege on her side. She was educated, erudite, but at the same time, she also had responsibility. She couldn't be seen making wrong political gestures and comments and writing. But even then, she went on to write this very perceptive poem, which eventually had a lot of domino effects and in her immediate circle. This poem goes like this: and the Bengali Babu, who's that rushing through his breakfast and bath? The Bengali Babu. He's terribly pressed. The Sahib will scold him should he be late. So he's got to get ready and bustles about. There he comes, decked in trousers and jacket. On his head, a pith helmet, tied round with a scarf, just like a basket. He can't bear to wait for anything, loses his temper and shouts. Furious, he'll slap or snap at his boy if the child should happen to call out, "Father." Everything's a rush, but he takes his own time over his hookah and puffs it at ease. Should his heart soften as he dreams in the smoke, a half-chewed betel leaf will console the child. The carriage costs 5 annas, but it hurts him to walk. Alas, there goes our Bengali Babu. Alas, there goes our Bengali Babu. He slaves away from 10 till 4, carrying his servitude like a peddler's wares, a lawyer or magistrate, or perhaps a schoolmaster, a sub-judge or clerk or overseer. The bigger the job, the greater his pride. The Babu thinks he's walking on air. Red in the face from the day's hard labor, he downs pegs of whiskey to relax when he's home. He's transported with pride at the thought of his rank, but faced with a sahib, he trembles in fear. Then He's obsequious. He mouths English phrases. His own tongue digests him. He heaps it with curses. The Babu's learned English. He swells with conceit and goes off in haste to deliver a speech. He flounders while speaking and stumbles and stutters, but he's speaking in English. You must come and hear. So it's a parody on the Bengali Babu, and as a result, so I mean, yes, I mean for me particularly, as I read this Bengali Babu, it reminds me of what I've been taught about our past as I was young. And for me, therefore, it really comes from a few spaces. One, it's a personal fight in my own circle. It's person. I'm constantly, even till date, when I talk to my uncles, when I talk to some of my close friends, and a casually sexist remark comes through, you know I am glad to tell myself that I can speak out. I've learned to speak up. A sort of, maybe a small indication of my unlearning, if not a lot. And at the same time, I'm also personally fighting with myself, and I've been learning to, uh, this fight with myself is basically coming in from a space which is, so to say, in many cases, in maybe in so many years behind, I would have looked at a person who's fat and said, oh my god, he's a fat person, man or woman, right? I come from that space of, immediately seeing someone on the road and saying, oh, okay, that person is fat. And then I used to judge myself, and I used to beat myself up, saying, "Oh my God, look at you! You're such a hypocrite. In your mind, you're just being, you're objectifying a person, so on and so forth." But then I learned that first reaction that's coming in my mind, that's probably coming from the space of a set bias that has been, programmed into me over the years. What matters more is not that first perception that I'm talking about, but probably what I think about right after I have had that perception. Am I reprimanding myself? Am I calling myself out? Am I saying, Sam, you were wrong in thinking so? This is wrong and this is why. Am I telling myself that? If I am doing so, I am actively working on it. You know? So eventually I've learned to forgive myself in a small way. Probably comes from a space of privilege also, you know but at the same time, this second, I call it the second perception, right? The first perception is this immediate thing. Oh my god, like, he's ugly, she's ugly, he's not good looking, she's not good looking, or he's talking like this, she's talking like that, she's wearing this, he's wearing this. That's the first bias, and I used to judge myself a lot on that. I've been trying a lot to tell myself, okay, let's leave aside that first bias that you had. What is the second thought that comes to your mind? And that second thought has been something that, I've been learning to pay a lot more respect to, learning to respect myself. And learning to respect myself, I'm hoping, will also give me the space to unlearn a lot more and learn more, listen to people more, listen to more women around me, women who are close to me, women who are acquaintances, women who I meet in, poetry circles, art circles, women I meet in Atagalata, and so many other spaces. And I'm just hoping that this space of, like, learning. I mean, as men, even if I was loving listening, hearing about, all of these lived experiences in rural centers, but I can just talk about myself as a privileged urban middle class male. And as a privileged urban middle class male, I think, uh, at the very least right now, as every individual male who believes in the right kind of feminism, who believes that feminism, who organically believes in feminism, or has been able to unlearn, their own biases, in some way or the other. I believe it's really a fight at a very personal level, with yourself and with people around you first. If you're able to talk up against people around you, I think half the battle is won there. I mean, talking on Facebook is fine, talking on a Google Meet is fine, but tomorrow when I talk with my father, can I talk up against him? Tomorrow when I talk with
Hmm.
my friend, and my best friend says, usko dekha tune, uska tange dekha, ye dekha, all of the stuff, or maybe some casual sexism on a WhatsApp group which is filled with which has your boss at work. Are you being able to make a statement there? I
Samantha,
think.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry to cut you.
I'm
We're
so sorry.
just
I'm so sorry.
running short of time,
I'm
because
so
we've.
sorry. Yeah. So
So
essentially,
I'll
that's where I wanted to
yeah.
comment from. I will rest my thoughts there. Thank you.
No, quickly, a question that I'd like to ask is, so you've been speaking a lot about unlearning behavior, and then, actually talking up, standing up, voicing out, and everything. So, on that note, I would like to ask if patriarchy affects men as well. Yes, from Bell Hooks' book, when Abhi read, there was one statement that said that feminism is anti-sexism. And you were talking about how casual sexism is practiced, and we just sort of push it in, slip it into our conversations. So quickly, if you can tell your thoughts about, do you think this casual sexism affects men as well?
So I'll try not to be verbose here. In 2 sentences or 3 sentences, I have a very strong view here, and this is a lived experience. As you see, I have long hair, and as you also may know, I mean, through my much self bro beating through my bio, I am in the space of being into management and marketing and branding. So till some time back, I was working with a larger conglomerate, Titan company, and I was a manager. I was the marketing guy. And more often than not, people would come and say, "Hey, are you a designer?" Hey, so like, do you write stuff? Are you a writer? Are you a painter? What happened that way is I saw lots of men, because I had a lot of men bosses and men peers in my organization. This casual sexism was translated through not taking me seriously because I did not look my part. I don't look like an MBA guy. I don't look like that marketing manager who should be wearing a shirt and a pant and just sitting like this, having a gruff good morning, not really humoring anybody else, and having a baritone and speaking like this, as opposed to, because I love jumping around, I love patting people on the back and goofing up. So I'm not construed as a serious male by the look of it and by the tone of it, to be taken for my management oriented talk to be taken seriously. So I would say yes, casual sexism, and therefore a sense of patriarchy. Men put down men so much also, if that's if you're not part of the straight jacket. Absolutely, yes.
I think, yeah, very well said. It happens in subtle instances, but the message is direct enough. I think, in that sense, it's very true. A round of applause for Samantak.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Abhirami.
You're not audible, Abhi.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God. A load of thank yous. Yeah. So, so many thoughts and so many topics that have been discussed. We had different realms also brought in. Samantak brought in the literature context as well, and yes, gender and literature also have a relationship. Just a thought that I would like to mention is, when we read something, poetry or anything else, without knowing who has written it, and if we start guessing whether it's a male author, female author, or someone else, then what are the social constructs we have even about literature? So yes, so I think this patriarchy seeps into every angle of our life, every context that you can see, and it's wonderful that more and more conversations are happening around it, and one such is right here, and we have four amazing speakers who have opened up a big canvas of conversations, something like, for me personally, it was kind of a narrow-minded um, perception I had about what feminism would mean to men. It would mean a little frustrating, anger towards women who actually, practice it. Maybe some empathy, maybe some really strong feminists. But today, I think that whole perception that I had has stretched like this, wide enough that, okay, there are these thoughts, and I'll take some time to actually figure out and think more, dwell more on these thoughts that I've heard from everyone. I'm opening the platform up for questions and answers. Anybody can just pose a question to any of our speakers. You may address them directly, and while two people are speaking, let the rest of us mute ourselves so that there's more clarity between two people.
Vishala, I just have one thing to add to your point about your perception being widened. Something that always comes to mind for me is the one of the dialogues from Aligarh, the movie about the gay professor who got kicked out of Aligarh University. So there is one situation where they're going on a boat, and Rajkumar Rao asks Manoj Bajpayee as to, I think he says, when did you realize that you were gay, or why does being gay matter to you, something? And the immediate response that he has is, आप लोग ये शब्दों के पीछे क्यों पड़े रहते हो? That is, yeah. So I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you for that. I think even Alan was mentioning that it's that simple. Like you do it, you don't like it, I do it. That's sort of a very simple space where freedom, in a sense, feminism or human rights or anything comes from the space of equality and freedom. So yeah, too many words, too many complexities as well. Yes. So anybody else? If the speakers want to, yes. So we have Veena. Welcome back, Veena.
Yeah,
For the
sorry,
rest of you.
I mean, like, I think something is catching up. I joined very late, and it was interesting to listen to the last speaker, Shamantak. Yeah, sorry, and this his Subodh's note on the word, na, it matters a lot. You know, for us, what I've always been discovering what it means to express myself as a woman, and what would be my words, which I haven't, you know, many of the proverbs that we talk to make an impact and all those things. No? It's ultimately feminism is a discovery of a new language, even, you know, apart from all, along with all other forms of expression. Nice listening to him. Hope I'll get to listen to others also a little later, probably a record or something.
Sure. We will share the recording with everyone who attended. Anybody else? Any question to our speakers? Any thoughts? Any note of appreciation? It's all welcome.
And on a note that Vishala, you mentioned what this narrow feeling. I mean, like, what would men feel about feminism, kind of thing. While you were talking, it occurred to me, many women are extremely patriarchal, and I would be interested to listen to them about feminism. You know, let them bring out all their reservation. You know, let us know, kind of thing. You know, at times they get so vicious with the women who have feminist thoughts, kind of thing. You know, it's not good for them, it's not good for anybody else. It's a matter of ideology, and ultimately what happens is how we interact and relate to one another. That's I mean, a lot of it came through Shamantik's reflection. Is ultimately the kind of being the best.
We have a couple of notes here. Stuti Goswami says, sad I joined in late, loving Samantak's words, learnt about a couple of new poets. Thank you, Stuti. Achaya says, very interesting session, coffee and candid conversations, well organized. Thank you, Vishala, Abhirami, and Durga Listens for having me as part of this having me as part of this forum discussion. Appreciate the opportunity given to share some of my thoughts, but more importantly, I sure have gained a lot of perspectives and learnings on the reality of feminism around us. Thank you, Achaya. We are very happy that you joined us for this session. And sorry about the order misplace. And there's Deepa Krishnan. She says, very interesting session. Thank you, Deepa. And Achaya again, Alan, this is to you. You spoke with so much heart, clearly shows why you make such an impact with your work on the field where it is ground reality. Kudos to you. Thank you, Achaya. Next, Alan. Okay, Alan has thanked him back. And Aaron Singh, Professor Allen is the best. Love you, sir. Thank you, Aaron. Srishti Sharma, great session, very informative and interactive. Thank you to all the speakers. Cheers to Team Durga. Thank you, Srishti. Thank you so much for joining in. Deepa Krishnan, happy, agree to Achaya. Alan, you were very true from the heart and well said. Achaya, you were very good. Thank you, Deepa, for joining us. Jinso Joseph, felt like a war waging crusader at church. Thank you, Jinso, for joining us. And then Rini Martin, it was a wonderful session, got so many perspectives from each of you. Varsha Manohar says, I enjoyed listening to the perspectives of men on feminism. Thanks for this session, Abhirami and Durga. Thank you, Varsha. Thank you, Rini. Alan, thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be part of this initiative. Thank you, Alan. The pleasure is ours too. Subodha, Samantak, Alan, Achaya, we're very happy you're part of this conversation. I think, and trust me, 21 people here, I can tell you that they agreed like this. We didn't have to spend so much time on searching men or anything like that. And I think this is normalcy. This is the kind of scenario that we must all slowly head towards. Absolutely. So thank you so much, everyone. I'd like to invite Meenakshi Giridhar, our lead for all our programs, to share her thoughts about this session and also, speak about the kind of work we do. Because for us, why are we starting and doing all these conversations is mainly because somewhere everything is interconnected, like how the realms all of you brought about are interconnected and they influence the movement or patriarchy or other practices. Our whatever proactive measures we're taking, the programs that we do are all interconnected, and we cannot we believe that the onus of safety is not just on women. It is on each one of us, and this is in a way calling everyone to talk about this and talk more about this until it becomes normal, that the onus is on each of us. So yes, Mini, I'd like to invite you to talk about Durga and share your thoughts about this session.
Thank you so much, Vishala and Abhi, for these conversations. In fact, when we
Mini, your voice is breaking.
Had the first Durga listens, it was amazing today again for such insightful conversations. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, your voice is breaking.
Okay. So
yes,
is this better?
Yes, audible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, audible. Yes.
All right. Yeah. So thank you so much, Vishala and Abhi, for bringing this to us. Thank you for all the panelists today who spoke. To get to hear from you as men and your perspectives on feminism is so heartening, because today I know for a fact that 22 participants here are carrying back some amazing insights into these conversations. Each one of you have given us so much to look forward to and so much positivity in our whole work. Because if you know a little bit about Durga, we work in the area of women and child safety, and specifically in the area of deterrence of sexual harassment against women and children. And in this work, we have felt that our conversations are incomplete if we did not include men in what we do, because quite literally you make up for 50% of our population. And none of this is possible without having allies from your end. And today's conversation makes me feel very heartened that we have so many allies who are working, championing this whole conversation, who are living, breathing, and believing in what we are talking about. And I feel very privileged to have met all of you on this online platform today, to have learned from your journeys and learned so much from you about your perspectives. And yes, I have always believed that patriarchy has hurt us the most, both men and women. And each one of your stories highlights that so beautifully. That it is time for each one of us to change the narrative, change the way our conversations are headed. In this area, what we have started to do, at least in Durga, is we've started to engage with small boys from schools and colleges. So students from the standard 8th upwards, 8th, ninth, and 10th, we work very closely with them on gender stereotypes, gender roles, making them understand where we come from when we say that it is unsafe or inappropriate, a certain behavior is inappropriate for us. And all of this conversation for us to be, coming from a space of, yes, we are among the privileged women, we are amongst the small minority group of women who have had everything working out in our direction, but there are a majority of women who do not get the access to the kind of safety that we know and understand. And for those women, we have felt that, having conversations with boys, helping them to understand this better, helping them to crack this whole concept of gender better, and creating a more gender fluid society where we are not so bothered about whether it is a man or a woman, but more as a human, and to start building empathy in those boys. I think, somewhere, Abhi, if you're, listening in, and uh, you will agree with me, right? If we have these champions in front of us, I think our job is so much easier. So it'll be wonderful to have them over once again to probably talk to some of our partners whom we work with. It will mean a world of difference to them, as well as to give the girls there, because the kind of people we work with are from underprivileged backgrounds, and they do not have access to these kind of conversations. So this will really make a big difference to them. And having said that, I'm not putting the pressure back on you, men. I just want to say thank you so much for participating. Thank you for your honesty, because you brought your souls out when you were talking to us. It was not just words that we heard, but we heard you speaking from the heart. So thank you once more for this, and hope to see you again on more conversations with Durga. Thank you, Vishala and Abhi. Fantastic job once again. Absolutely proud of what you've created for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Minnie. Thank you for your encouraging words. And yes, here we have four more Durga champions. And I won't be wrong in saying Durga ambassadors also, because I'm speaking on behalf of all four of you, because you believe what we as an organization believe and want to bring a change through our action, through proactive measures. So yes, and like Minnie said, it would be wonderful to have you all anchor something. And while there's no pressure, but we would be anticipating, that you join us, because I think together we can. And yes, thank you for joining the session. Before you all leave, I'll make a simple request. Can you all leave your email IDs in the chat section so that we can keep you updated with programs like Durga Listens or anything else that would interest you? The fact that you are here, like, right now there are 19 people, but at a point there were 29 people. I think it's because there is that like-mindedness. And so I'm sure, you would want to be informed about these. No spam from our side, but whenever there's another Durga Listens, which is going to be a fortnightly event, we will update you, and we'll share other things as well with you. You can, join us in many ways. So, on that note, I'll take leave. And Abhirami, would you like to say something?
It is just a big load of thanks to all four speakers who have joined us today. And it is also exciting that I know them offline also, and I've been able to see them online in such a different view, getting a lot of perspectives from them. My mind has really opened up to another level today, and I'm very glad that I can continue to have these conversations and these inputs and downloads from them offline also. Thank you all for joining, and also all the others who have joined the meeting. I could see a lot of my friends, lot of mutual friends for all of us. Thank you all very much for joining, and we hope to see you again and again in Durga Listens with different topics and different suggestions. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Durga team, as well for being a part of this session and supporting us, this conversation and the movement. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great evening and a weekend ahead. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.